Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. My name is Henry Moon, and I'll be your host. And to my left is our new co-host, Michael Vasquez, getting the official title bump. Thank you so much for joining us, dude.
Yes, excited to be here. Excited to talk about a little bit of world building for today.
Yeah, it's going to be a great episode of world building. I think March is going to be our world building month. So we're going to have several podcasts about that this month. And actually, we have a great interview that's not world building, but it is with a graphic designer, an illustrator, Shannon Kogienko, at the end of the month for you. All interviews are going to be the final Monday of the month. So before we get into the podcast topic for the day, I just want to get into some housekeeping stuff. Number one is really exciting. I think we finally built out our studio. So let me show you what that looks like if you're here on Spotify with us. We actually have different camera angles for myself, for Michael over here.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, and then our group shot over here.
And our intro.
And we kicked the intro off again. I'm still learning how to use this software. So every time it gets brought back, I turn it off. Don't worry, that's the only time that's happening today. Growing pains a little bit, but anyway, so I'm really excited to share the studio with you. Again, if you're watching on Spotify, which brings me nicely to my second housekeeping point, which is that not only do we have a YouTube channel now, Creative Thinker Podcast, on YouTube, where you can watch us if you're not a Spotify person, you just don't like that app, or you don't like, I don't know, however you feel about Spotify. You can check us out on YouTube, and you can see our smiling, beautiful faces, at least in Michael's case, and we can interact with you over there on that social media platform. We also have an Instagram now. Both are going to be monitored by me primarily, so if you're like, I want to talk to Michael, I can relay the message, don't you worry.
Yeah, or you can check out Immortal Mexican on Instagram. That's my personal Instagram handle. So lots of different ways you can reach out to us if you need to, or if you would like to add to the Creative Thinker Podcast, add any topics that you would like to have us converse about or talk about. Definitely a bunch of different ways to reach out to us.
And the Instagram, just for the record, is at CRTV, THNKR over there. And it is Creative Thinker Podcast, CRTV, THNKR, and then the word podcast on YouTube. So that's our housekeeping stuff. Thank you for your support. That's what leads to this this studio and this wonderful space and this continual upgrade of what we get to bring you and showcase for you and hopefully entertain you with. So thank you so much for your continued support. One other thing is I switched over to our Apple Podcast page, and we now have 4 5-star ratings. So thanks again.
Hey.
It's a big deal when you guys feel strong enough about what we're bringing to you that you're willing to leave a review and tell the world sort of that you're enjoying it. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. That was a nice surprise yesterday.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So let's move on into March World Building Month.
All right,
Michael,
yeah.
You got a little bit to share on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of want to bring a little bit more structure to the podcast as far as, a topic of the month. Obviously, that's not going to be the same. We're trying this thing out. So for our first topic of the month, it's going to be world building for the month of March. So what we're specifically going to be diving into is the creation of cities in your story. So today we're going to talk more about a fantasy story. Like we said, we both play D&D quite a bit. So we're going to kind of enter into that genre for city building. And then next week, we're actually going to be talking about sci-fi cities and what that's going to look like, and kind of our introduction to those sci-fi cities, some tips, tricks that you can use, and hopefully something to create some type of inspiration for your cities. And then the following week, I forgot what we were doing.
We haven't decided. That's why. For
there
the
we
third
go.
week of March, we have a list of like 6 things to pull from. So we were talking about like maybe an ensemble cast, maybe like building a good villain, building a good plot hook, things like that, where it's just like a way to enrich a full story. We're trying to hit on the major points of building up a good story this month. So we hadn't decided on the last one, but we will.
Yeah.
And if you want to make any submissions towards that, I'll try to leave, at least hit us up on social. That's the easiest thing.
Right.
Just send us a message on any of our socials, and we love getting feedback and ideas from our listeners. So continue, Michael, or did you hit
No,
that
so
point?
that's going to be our topic of the day. But I believe as we're talking about city building and world building, one of the tools that we have used together has been the exponential creation. So you want to talk a little bit about that and what that is?
Exponential. Our exponential creation method. So we're going to be diving into that quite a bit this episode. So one of the main points about exponential creation is that you ask a ton of questions and you flip everything on its head. So it's a very quick way to create. I know I've talked about this on the podcast before. So we worked on a story for a grand total of, I think, like 2 hours in person. We had a 2-hour conversation where we worked on it, and after that conversation, we spent about 6 hours writing between the two of us, and we came up with 30 pages single-spaced of background information for our story. And we used the exponential creation method. And it's all about asking yourself questions. So, for example, we had an episode on here, and I've got a pen in front of me right now. So, for example, all I've got's a pen. So what do I know about that pen? It's scratched up on the side. You can see that maybe on the camera. Maybe it's too small. But it's scratched up on the side. So why is it scratched up on the side? And then we come up with something like, well, maybe this person's using it as a, nervous tick. And so why are they nervous, right? This is the next question. And you keep going down that rabbit hole of question after question after question. If you get stuck and say, well, maybe I don't know why they're nervous, well, maybe that's not the right question. So we flip it on its head and say, well, maybe maybe that they don't know that they're nervous. And now we're extrapolating more from like the wider area around them. Now the question becomes, what in the world is feeding into them that they don't really realize? Or, maybe there's some cataclysmic world event that's going on that is a part of their situation and feeding into them, but they're not really paying attention. So there's another answer to the question as long as you continue to reshape it and move it around. And so that's what we try to do when we're world building, and that's what we're going to showcase for you today as we dive into this fantasy setting, which is today's official topic of fantasy world building cities. So I'm going to kick it over to Michael here, and what he's going to do is introduce some fantasy cities. I believe, if I remember correctly, that they're D&D cities that you've made.
Yes, yeah. So they're going to be D&D original cities that I created from scratch, obviously taking inspiration from other sources of media, but yeah, they were my own cities that I created for you guys.
Yeah, so we're going to do kind of a dramatic introduction to show you this is how the process ends up. And I want to do that because we're going to create a city on the podcast today. Between the two of us, I'm a little nervous about that because I never know whether my brain's going to be firing on all cylinders. But through this exponential creation method, hopefully we're going to get all the way to a completed city on the podcast today, right in front of your very eyes. But before we sort of force you to listen to the more technical part of the process, I want to make sure that we both have a chance to share cities to show you kind of where we'll end up and maybe what we're capable of, so that you are confident in listening to the rest of the process and saying that this is going to end up somewhere good. So yeah, take it away, Michael. You got an introduction for us. Give us a dramatic reading. What's the name of the city?
All right, so Imagine you're going to the city of Harvest. So again, it's a D&D setting. So as you and your party of 5 have been traveling for weeks on end underneath the mountains of the spine in the center of the continent, trying to survive against the monsters underneath into the Underdark. Moving forward, your guide finally tells you around the corner we're going to start seeing the light. And as you exit the mountain through this cave, you can see off in the distance, one, that you're about halfway up a mountain and are going to have to traverse down the mountain into this desert landscape in front of you. And in the distance, you can see this giant city made of stone with a wall completely around it. You can't tell how big the wall is from as far as you are. After a couple hours getting down the mountains, you can start seeing, as you're getting closer to the city, that this wall is massive. You continue to move forward through the desert in between this mountain and the city. And eventually, a group of centaur sentries come upon you. You see them running towards you as these group of something is coming towards their city. They're on patrol. They see you. They start coming to you. You tell them that you have business in the city, and they continue to escort you towards this city. Again, it's this, from the outside, this giant city made of stone, and as you start getting closer, it's maybe 200, 300 feet high. And as they let you into the city, you can see that the stone wall is probably about 30 feet long. They open up these gates, they let you through, and from there you can see the hustle and bustle of a dwarven city all around you. The things that stick out is there is another wall in the center, much, much shorter, about 50, 60 feet up in the air. And there is a massive crater in the center of this city. It's a dwarven city. This is the giant mine. Welcome to Harvest.
Nice. Welcome to Harvest. Harvest is one of my favorite cities to visit. Just because it feels like there's always some cool architecture and cool, like just the colors and shapes are so stark. Every time I've heard you describe it, and it's like it's a very work-driven city also. So I think that those things are really cool. That's a good first city.
Yeah.
To introduce. Thank you for doing that. But you also have a second city to introduce. Would you like me to do one of mine and then do one of yours?
We can go ahead and do one of yours, one of mine. Then we'll kind of talk about, what makes them special, what we put into our cities.
Okay. And the intention is to give you some contrast between what we're able to create. So, sure, let me jump over into Nassau, which is from a pirate campaign that I worked on for several months, but. And it's based off of actual Nassau and some off of some Pirates of the Caribbean stuff and a lot of my own creation as well. So that being said, it's okay to draw from anything you've seen in life. Everybody is copying something and somebody. So anyway, let me jump into the fictional D&D setting of Nassau. So you've been on a ship for 3 months from the elven homeworld of Elysium. You finally see a port after being lost at sea for the last 3 weeks. Your boat comes ashore into the soft sand. It's stuck on a sandbar about halfway out. You can see that there are scorched earth marks of just burnt trees and broken forest, and the island recedes up above you another 30-40 feet that you can't see from this small boat as you come to shore. But once you reach the sand, you see that there's a lot of wreckage, a lot of ship parts that are scattered intermittently along the beach. But there is a path leading off to your left that is clearly man-made. So you follow that path up, and after about 20 minutes, you come to a green clearing, and there is a bunch of small huts made out of sails and old boat parts. It's just full of muck and people that are not living well. You've been at sea for 3 months without a bath, but your smell pales in comparison to this part of the city. The path continues to lead on to the left, past the desperate souls you've seen here. And when you reach the top of the hill, you see homes, again, made of boat parts, but these are made by people who know what they're doing. They're made artistically. They're made to last and withstand the weather. These are made sturdy. There's one made drag that leads to a church made from the bow of a ship, and that ornamental front piece is the steeple of this particular chapel. Here people are dressed nicer, but they're still very clearly privateers or pirates. And there's a lot more people just milling around. There is a sense of energy here, a sense of commerce, a sense of camaraderie, and a sense that almost everyone here is drunk. Welcome to Nassau. It's our introduction, sort of the flyover view of Nassau. So that's the first D&D city that I ever created. There's a lot more striated structure, a lot more different communities in my later cities, but that one I felt like has a good contrast to the one I'll introduce later.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, our third city that we have already created is the city of Meridian on the southern parts of the same continent as Harvest. From your original kind of home base, this city is downriver. So all you need to do is grab a boat, and it's about a 2 days journey to go downriver. As you're going down the river, you do notice other boats that are passing you going upstream using magic in the world, very similar to like what you would see in like Avatar for like water bending. So you see a couple boats pass you as they use this as a trade route as well. But as you get closer to the city, the first thing that sticks out to you is, one, the smell of the ocean, and two, you see 4 large towers on each side of the city. As you go in to dock and get off the boat, you see the hustle and bustle of what is a port town. Boats are not only docking here from the river, but also from the ocean. And as you begin to go into this city, you notice that there are almost pockets of different groups. There's the slums, there's kind of some gang activity, and then as you have to kind of go through this harder exterior, a lot of people have this hard face that they've seen some stuff. Y'all end up going to what y'all like to go to first: bars, taverns, very joyful, boisterous atmosphere. And then as you continue to go down to the South Tower, you enter into what would be almost like a wizarding school. And as you kind of see students moving around, you go into this large tower. And as you enter into the tower, you see that it is much bigger on the inside than it appears on the outside. You continue to meet with individuals and get shown around, get favor with some of the mages, and you learn these towers all are part of the city, part of the economy of the city, and they all have a job that they're supposed to be doing. The southern tower that y'all entered into happens to be one of the mages towers, and the other cities, while they're not all controlled by mages, they are all controlled by very powerful people. One of them is like a paladin kind of hub. So that atmosphere, while you don't go there, you hear that it's a very different atmosphere from this kind of wizarding school, almost like a Hogwarts-esque type school. So that's a brief introduction to Meridian.
And Meridian was fun because I felt like there was always a lot going on there. It's like whatever part of the town you're in, it's not that it's made for tourists, but it's also it's just made for a lot of people. So there's always a lot of people passing through. There was always a lot of people that were there for spectacle and there for entertainment. I thought that was really cool.
Right. Oh yeah, I forgot to even mention the whole reason y'all were down there. So after you go to the bars and taverns, you kind of head towards the center of the town, and you see this almost Colosseum-like structure, and there people are signing up for the Crucible, this epic fight that happens every year where teams come together, sign up, and kind of vie for clout and money amongst the people there, or amongst the city. And a bunch of different teams sign up to fight these crazy monsters. And y'all decided to go there.
Yeah, it was a good time. That was one of my favorite parts of the campaign too. But we also got sieged so many different ways.
Yeah, no, like you said, there was a lot going on in that city. From the time y'all got there to the time y'all left, especially, there was quite a bit that a lot of plot points that happened there for sure.
Yeah, I've got one more I want to introduce, sort of in a flyover kind of way by race. It's called New Elysium. So this was like the Cuba of my story. So essentially, the Fae occupy the city. Goliaths occupy the city, and giants occupy the city. So one of the reasons was because there was a mountain range there, and Goliaths are new to the area, but giants and Fae were not. There's a jungle as well. So the Fae have been enslaved to work the fields, and sort of been removed from their magic because that is their strongest, they're sort of doing the deforestation, and the more they deforest, the less access they have to their magic, and that sort of takes away their edge up on giants. So the Fae used to be in charge, then the Goliaths showed up, and they teamed up and took over and started destroying the forest, right? So the Fae are now the subclass, and then the Goliaths are the ones that are in charge. They sort of betrayed the giants once they came into power, and just through sheer numbers are now running the city of New Elysium. And so it's a very mismatch kind of city, and it's a lot of damage and a lot of things that have become casualties of the class warfare. But there's also so much trade and so much money that comes through this port that things are still energetic and moving forward, even though there's sort of this major strife going on. In our story, the heroes helped out the Fae. They helped them come back to prominence, and because of their mistreatment from the Goliaths become a subclass, and because of our party's love of the giants, who were sort of locked away in their mountain range. They would work in the harbors, and so they were some of the first people they came into contact with. Through that, they became in control of a very powerful magical artifact that led to them, again, overtaking the Fae. So we had these three areas where the Fae were in the jungle, the giants were in the mountains, and the Goliath were the people by the shore, the reason the city exists in the first place. But now all three races benefit from it, and the giants are in charge. And everything I know about giants, everything I've read about their culture, led them to be very brutish and barbaric, and like Colosseum's kind of the same as the Crucible in Meridian, but it's more than that, where there's like wrestling games and just like arm wrestling is what I was thinking of. Arm wrestling, actual wrestling, and like just feats of strength and battle. So it's more like the Olympics than it is the Colosseum. And so that's sort of as much as I want to get into detail about that city. So what are some things when we're talking about Meridian and Harvest? Let's start with Harvest. What was the first thing that you thought of in that city that allowed you to then create the vibe of that city? We've talked about making a vibe, and I know that's important to both of us. So how did you find the personality of that city? What was the first thing you created?
Man, so finding the personality of that city really goes all the way back to making my world building map, because I at least wanted to have certain points where if someone were to ask, hey, what's this direction, I can at least give you one city. So I had a map that I grabbed from the internet and just started like kind of drawing different locations. And in the desert, I drew a circle and I was like, that'd be kind of interesting. But I didn't really know what I meant by that. So then as I was actually trying to figure out the campaign, I was like, okay, I want these giant walls there. I want something different. This is something that's not going to really be part of other cities. Like, yes, you have like walls around the city, but these are going to be like crazy massive walls. I know God of War Ragnarok just came out, or not just, but relatively recently came out. And there's a scene there when you're going into Asgard, you see this giant wall, and I was like, that's Harvest. Like, that was what I envisioned for Harvest, is this giant wall that goes up, that it's not necessarily made of like brick or concrete. It's made through magical means. And so like the bricks don't even like lay in with each other. I mean, they do, but like it looks messy, but still forged together. So that was really the first thing that I thought, is this giant wall. And then as we started more into the world building of, you know, there are no more dwarves around, but there's still one kind of location of the dwarves, and it's going to be here in this city. And then I saw, you know, like you said, you take inspiration from different images. I saw an image somewhere through social media of this giant hole in the ground, and it was like, now look at the houses, just so you can understand how big this hole is. And I was like, that's cool. I want to add that into my world somewhere. And I was like, oh, this is a great place. It's a mine, right? So they've mined this magical item or this magical mineral so much that it's, you know, this giant crater now in this hole. And these walls are there to protect their, you know, very, very valuable resource. And then as far as like the architect, I was like, okay, I want it to be, what would Dwarven architect look like above ground? And I wanted it to look very like almost like Roman-esque in their architect, because dwarves are known for their forging and for their architecture, and I wanted their architecture to look really dope. They have like the throne room that a lot of battles ensue later. I wanted that area to look really dope. Like, it had a lot of like granite and marble and stuff like that. And I also wanted to see like, okay, what, as far as like the personality, it is very much a working class, working force. Everyone has their purpose, but like, who are the people who are trying to overthrow the people in power, which y'all ended up dealing with later. So those were kind of like my first thoughts, is just putting something down on paper and then figuring out why it's there, what's unique about it. And a giant crater and these giant walls seem pretty unique.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, those were like the landmarks of the city, but just that you had like two inspirational moments. One was you drew a circle on a piece of paper. I mean, the map. You knew where it was in the world. So you made the map first and the city second. And then after you made the city, you just saw another picture of like, here's a big hole in the ground, and they're dwarves. And so it's just like another aha moment. And then everything else was sort of.
Then my third aha moment, because I was looking at the map and it's like, okay, it's desert. It's like, oh, this has got to be the trade point between this side of the mountain range, because the mountain range cuts the continent in half, except for one spot where you can go around, which is the route y'all took to this city, and then the other side of the continent, because the mountain ranges go all the way across. So this is their trade route, and that's where y'all ended up, getting with another caravan from that city out to get back to y'all's home base.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty heavy. I feel like the amount you expanded it out from those 3 ideas is so cool. And like I said, we're going to get into that today. I feel like for me with Nassau, the whole town was predicated on the idea of One Eye, now named Bellamy. It was a throwaway character, but I had basically a goblin character with one leg, one eye, and I just wanted him to be representative of just the dregs that live here, right? I wanted it to be a representation of the absolute poverty, because I knew I wanted the home base to be a huge part of the game, to where like everything you did started to upgrade this port, started to upgrade this this place of living. And so when I got One Eye, I was like, okay, he's got a donkey, he's got a cart. Right. That's the only possessions he has in his life. And so when our characters arrive, that's who they meet. That's who leads them up the hill to the people who are important. Now, what I ended up doing was making him too likable, I guess, because he's now been adopted by the party and is still a part of the goings-on.
Right.
Almost like a year later. That was my starting point. Everything else was built around him. So it was the idea of having a base and having it start off rather impoverished. Those are my 2 ideas. And then from there, it was like, okay, like what we do with actually in real life, somewhat controversial to say this, I suppose, but is that we have like our homeless people shelters, and those are kind of away from the touristy locations.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And so I wanted to follow that idea and say, okay, well, this first landing you come to on the island is going to be where the people who really can't, handle their liquor, or can't, are owe too much to too many people. That's where they're going to be.
It's kind of like the slums.
Yeah,
I guess if you're gonna have to like put a term to it.
So, so that was my third point, and everything else grew from there. And watching people interact with the city and stuff, and also trying to give you guys access to the world from there.
Yeah.
And quick access, even though like fast traveling in my campaign was always like you have to sing a shanty, kind of like Black Flag. I was playing that at the time.
Yeah. It's crazy the amount of inspiration that'll come from like what you're doing, as far as like reading video games, watching TV or watching a series. Man, I got a lot of inspiration when I was playing God of War to like add this stuff into a D&D game, and like how can I change it to be cool. So yeah, I mean, whatever you're doing is always going to bring inspiration to your world, especially if you're world building during that time. And
now that I've seen Last Airbender, I can see how that played into a large effect early on.
Yeah.
It was like, this is so much like the Last Airbender episode. At least in the early, first month or so of playing, it was definitely.
It was a lot of improv, so I just kind of, I guess reflected what I knew, and it was Avatar.
Yeah, no, it was super fun. That's why we're still doing it 3 years later, 3.5, whatever. So now that we've introduced, let's move on. We've introduced some of our cities. We talked about it in a little more detail. And now it is time, through whatever means necessary, to create our own fantasy town, D&D themed town or city. So I guess first things first. What do you want to call this city? I'm going to write it down. I've got a pad and pen here. What is the name of this city?
Man, so
I'm putting you on the spot.
Speaking of cities, so there are a lot of different ways, for people to, if you have a hard time with figuring out the names of a city, you can just, I think it's called Fantasy Name Generator. So if you are really in a pinch, Fantasy Name Generator, shout out. I know plenty of people who use that, and the list of options that it gives you is ridiculous. I've gotten like Halo names on here They have city names and even, okay, let's look at places and locations, magic school names, plaza names, tavern names, tattoo parlors. So the list that they have there is literally endless, and they continue to add more. So if you're ever having trouble with that, do that. Or what I'll do sometimes is I'll look at whatever is in the room and I'll turn the name backwards and then try and figure out, how is that going to work? So right now I'm looking at this stand right here. So we're going to go.
That's going to be Orneb, dude. That's not a good name.
No. Well,
What about Roween?
Roween? Yeah.
Yeah, see right here we got newer.
There we go.
That's the discount product for camera and recording equipment. It's actually really, really good.
Nice.
Because obviously we're recording on it, and it sounds dope, as
Yes.
you can hear out there.
Absolutely.
Creative thinkers all over the globe.
So there we go. Roween is our city name.
Click on the pen here. There we go.
go.
Ooh, that's satisfying. Okay, so
We both said that at the same time. Okay, so now, where is the city located?
we just talked about a lot of mountain ranges, so that's what I've got in my head. It's like let's do mountains on one side, and I want to get away from the ocean and desert because we've both done that before. So I would say mountains on one side. So I'm just going to draw some mountains over here. Mountains. I don't know why I'm making them into A's. Just make a bigger one in the back so I know it's mountains. Okay.
There we go.
And then on the other side, jungle or forest of some sort.
Ooh, I like that. A jungle on the other side.
How about that?
And so what I'll do if I'm doing something like this is I'll just, like I said, I like to draw. So I'll draw the city, draw the mountain range, kind of like you're doing, jungle, and to help me with world building. Yeah.
There's my crap drawing for people who are watching. There you go.
And then I will try as soon as I can find a time to go back and also name those spots, because inevitably your players, or it'll come up in your story. It's gonna be like, well, what's this jungle called? You can't just keep saying the jungle, because someone's gonna be like, what's the name of this jungle? So if you have that ahead of time, that will help.
So like, to me, when I hear, we got jungle on one side, we got mountains on the other, what I picture almost immediately is people who are living off the jungle, not the mountains. Which then tells me there's some sort of there's a hidden oasis somewhere in the forest, and there's a hidden temple somewhere in the forest. Those are sort of like the trope things of those, and I feel like, I don't know, for whatever reason, when I say jungle, I'm curious about the trees, and I want to get in there and see what's there.
Yeah.
And less so about the mountains. So sorry if you're a mountaineer out there, but that's how I feel. So
it's funny because what I'm thinking too is what lives in the jungle? Why has this city not expanded and deforested the jungle? Are they trying to keep the jungle alive? Do they respect the jungle? Are they of a druidic nature and want to, upkeep nature? They have this giant mountain on the side. What's their culture? What's their religion? Do they worship, like I said, like some type of druidic nature? What do you think? What do you think about that?
It's almost like secluded. Not connected to the outside world, which makes me think tribal, which makes me think more like Aztec.
Okay.
Where it's almost like maybe there's some other tribes that are deep in the jungle, but this is the one that has been the most profitable and is sort of like the ruling, biggest population in the area, that is completely unconnected to the outside world. Like you have to know where you're going to get there, kind of deal. So we've got.
So that you would say, I know you use the word like Aztec, so would you want to say like they worship like the sun and nature and things like that, or do you even want to bring that into this tribe at the moment?
Well, I think we got to stick with fantasy, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to bring it too much into the real world, and I feel like you know a lot more about the actual druidic gods of like D&D than I do.
Yeah.
So is there one in there that we could use?
I mean, Man, you're putting me on the spot.
I
And
am, yeah.
cannot. I think it's
You
like
got the internet right there too.
Melora is like the nature god in D&D.
Melora.
So we'll just
Okay.
go with that. I believe. If I'm wrong,
I have no idea how to
it's
spell
our
that.
city that we're creating.
Melora. Do we know anything about Melora then?
Melora is no, I'm gonna make this up.
Okay. All right. Sweet.
So Melora is, a loving deity of nature. As long as you preserve nature, that doesn't necessarily mean like don't cut down trees, but it just means like honor and respect nature. Then she gives you the blessing. But if you do something wrong to nature, unnecessarily, like deforesting or doing poisoning the land or
So that
maybe even venturing like into the mountains too far and mining, then like wrath comes down on you because that is going against nature.
So that brings in a question to me is like what happens when you break the rule? And so even like if you had a character that is like poor and needs to feed their family and there's some sort of like there's always some sort of deer living in jungles like that kind of that size animal, maybe a pig or something. So what happens if there's like a poor person who knows they're supposed to respect the forest, they kill what is a sacred animal to Melora?
Ooh.
What then happens to the children of Ruin? Do they take you? Is that the realm of human sacrifice? Are we at that level of tribalism?
I think we could do that because it's like, you have defiled, the most sacred nature. So yeah, we'll go kind of, I guess we're leaning into the Aztec theme. So we're going to go human sacrifice with that one.
So then, I mean,
Sorry if we're offending anybody. I'm just going based off of, media that I've seen. I haven't done a lot of study into any type of Aztec history.
Yeah, it's all archetypes and it's all surface level and caricature because it has to be at this level. I mean, in order to do it quickly, you have to have a shorthand for something. So
Yeah.
So you almost have like this shrine in the woods, right? And that can even be the first thing that your characters come in contact with. This sort of barbaric scene where maybe even you have a lot of cults and things make art out of their barbarism because it is religious and there is a lot of art around religion, and so it's almost like the bodies are used to create some form of art nearby.
Yeah. The first thing that kind of comes into my mind is going to a different culture. From the show Vikings, they do what they call a blood eagle, where, like they cut the back and then they kind of pull the muscles up and the person's like still alive through this whole process. And so
that's why I stopped watching the show. That episode, I couldn't hack it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, it could be like a form of someone who's, disobeyed or broken the rule and their body is left as a blood eagle and they don't remove the body.
Ooh, almost like The Last of Us, right? Where it's like, it's a very artistic, it's like this fungal art that they turn into right before they become zombies. It's like, it's the coolest looking thing.
Cool,
it's
cool.
very colorful and it's beautiful. And so it's almost like they've taken the people who have disobeyed and they've made them into the jungle and they've made them into a work of art for Melora.
Yeah.
And so almost like that idea of you die and you get made into a tree.
Yeah.
But more than that, where it's like you become in a plant holder almost, like they pose you in a certain way so the vines can grow up to the trees. So it's almost like this human jungle where the body is then turned into roots and things, and so the plants look human. They have those shapes.
Oh, that's really cool.
So
like plants are looking like humans. That I like that. All right, so we kind of hit, location. So one of the things that I wanted to do to help us, get some inspiration on creating the city was looking at just looking up how to create realistic cities and villages for D&D. So loosely going off of the how to create realistic villages and cities from halflinghobbies.com. So That's our one source that we're using for today. Just want to shout them out because we're going to be using some of their stuff. So we hit, where the city's at. We kind of already have the genre of people who are going to be there. It is a fantasy setting. So I know we said like kind of Aztec designs, but are we going to put any like different species or like different creatures, races here?
Well, I think D&D, right? So you're going to have trade with the mountains. If there's anybody else interacting with the city, it's going to be either Underdark or like dwarves, goblins, that kind of stuff. Drow, maybe.
You know what I'm thinking of, like the Underdark Drow in D&D lore typically have like white translucent skin or kind of like a bluish skin. What if they have like white paint on them as they come out, or like this kind of like chalky paint as they come out?
Kind of like Avatar a little bit.
Do they do that in Avatar?
Have you seen it?
Avatar? Which Avatar are you
talking about? The first one, the blue people.
People. I have seen it once.
Okay.
Many years ago.
They're definitely blue, and they have white paint in one of them. It's like, I don't know. That's the first thing I called to mind. I'm just throwing it out there.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so blue drow, and those are the people that this is the main culture that's in Ruin.
Yeah.
Okay. So blue.
Well,
drow.
so I was thinking like the drow, like they have this paint on them, but like they're the ones that come from the mountains and trade with the population of Rowan.
Okay. So
because like drow in D&D lore, like they're supposed to be sunlight sensitive, and so I'm assuming like this little area is kind of while they use the jungle is different from the city. It's kind of my vision of this.
Yeah, no, 100%. So then like the main people that inhabit this this city, it depends on what vibe you want. I don't know, like that determines so much.
Yeah.
I'm sketched out to make that decision.
So whenever you're in doubt, humans. In any fantasy setting, you can always go with human. And then a lot of times, like what I'll do, because of my D&D Beyond subscription, I will go through D&D Beyond or any type of tabletop role-playing game, like what are the species, and then I will go down, where we at, races. So then I'll just kind of go down. I'm a sucker for Dragonborn, so I always put Dragonborn in there.
I know that's the case.
Yeah,
like,
so
we
could do like half orcs or orcs in there, and they're just like a more civilized version of the archetype orc.
Like I like half orc, but I also like the idea that they're a little bit more like Leonin, right? Like maybe, but like a jaguar version.
Ooh, yeah, so
would be cool.
Cat folk, kind of jaguar folk,
or somebody else that would be really attuned to the forest and willing to, I don't know, make it home, make it, I don't know, like small people or any of those.
Furbolg is another good one that we could throw in there. They're distant cousins of giants. The first Furbolgs wandered the primeval forest of the multiverse, and the magic of those forests intertwined itself with the Furbolg soul. I mean, that's kind of, foresty.
Speech of Beast and Leaf. All right.
There we go.
So what else do we know about Furbolgs?
That's a good question. That's all I know about Furbolgs.
We're going to create it as we go is the answer. Okay.
That's right.
So these are like real stocky, also bluish skinned. They look like small troll people, I guess, a little bit.
They do kind of, yeah.
So anyway, we got Furbolgs. They're stocky folks that live in Ruin. Okay.
And
I saw the next question on the website was how long has the city been there?
Yeah.
Which begs the question, because we already said it's old. Mm-hmm. It's an old town or village, or I guess whatever.
We can just say city, title of the episode.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's a good point. Okay, so the city, the first question that comes to mind is like, what have they been able to build that is like 100-year project? Like there's that chapel in Europe that still isn't done. I forget which one it is. It's like the architecture is so complex that it's like it's been construction for I think 500 years.
If it's just like a pyramid, right?
But yeah, like exactly that takes forever to build. So you got pyramid, you've got maybe a few houses that are like literally carved out of the side of the mountain, maybe something that would just take forever to do. Like maybe like some really tall tree that it's like they've worshipped into being, or like Melora has grown.
What if there's like this giant kind of, like you said, giant trees that you start making houses out of, almost like the elves in Lord of the Rings, where there's all this architect that goes into the trees. We could have something like that go on there. Like there's one central tree, and that's like the holy place. And they're still carving out, everything that they need for their holy spot or, capital.
Maybe like they've built the pyramid around the tree almost.
Oh, yeah. Where it's like, kind of like three sides are almost completed, but there's like one, like just area where it kind of goes around the tree. I like it.
Dope. Okay. So we've got that. We've got some other landmarks already.
Yeah.
We've got the people that are there, and then the age of the city. Let's just throw out like 3,000 years, and then that will. And we talked a bit about their commerce. So what are they trading out? What are they trading with the Drow? I feel like that's a.
I would say like they're probably trading. Because like the Underdark has like a lot of resources already, so what can they not get out? What if there's he's talked about an oasis. What if there's some type of like magical healing properties in the oasis, kind of like how was it Nassau that you had that oasis? So what if there's like some
healing pool?
Yeah, like there's some type of healing spring, and they're able to jar it up, and that's part of their trade that they give, so that they can help. What if that's the key to like, I don't know, longer life or something like that?
Maybe those are healing potions in this part of the world.
Heck yeah.
So healing potions
From the healing pool, healing spring,
from Melora's something,
from
Tears of Melora. Oasis.
Tears of Melora. So you can kind of see, like, as you're listening to us, just talk. This is what we're talking about with that exponential growth. Is we're just kind of throwing ideas back and forth. Like, okay, what about this? What about that? So far our ideas have been like, okay, cool. And then we even just had just now a little bit of a misunderstanding about the Drow, and so that's how that exponential process, the exponential creativity works. Is we're going to continue to vibe off of each other, and it's going to go from where this would have taken me a minute just to do, we've done in 5-10 minutes already.
Probably more like 20, but yeah,
20 minutes of just creating already like a pretty dope place, and we haven't even gotten to like, okay, who are the people, who are the leaders yet? Because that will also come. Some people will start with the leaders and like, okay, who's the main one in charge? What's the economy? So everyone's got a different way of doing it. So, just, as you're listening, thinking about that.
And the other thing is, like, we've had a couple moments where we didn't like our first idea, but we weren't sure where to go. And it's never like an immediate, ew, that's stupid.
Right.
So there's like an element of not judging the process. It's like where you end up can be totally different than where you started, and that's okay. But it's important to be open to or receptive to the person you're working with, and not saying like, well, maybe I don't vibe with that idea yet, so why don't I ask another question instead of like why don't I just tell them no and say I don't like that.
Yeah.
It's like we want to dive in further, as much as you can create, as fast as you can create it. That's what we're going for. And
sometimes in that creative process where I've been like trying to create a world, like even where y'all are at in your D&D campaign, I was like, okay, I just need to throw down everything to the page, and if it doesn't stick, then I'll pull it out later and be like, okay, that wasn't a great idea, or I can workshop that idea. So if you don't have someone to ask or bounce ideas off, you're able to still just throw down ideas. Okay, even if it's not a good idea, throw it down. Like the Drow, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe we switch it back to stereotypical dwarves. That would make sense. Dwarves are in the mountains, stereotypically. What if you change the races? Like I said, human. We have human, jaguar folk, and furbolg. What if you don't like that combination? What if you want to change it? What if traditional, or old school D&D players, like, what if this is a Yuan-Ti town and there's a bunch of snake folk and there's, instead of Melora, it's this snake deity that they're worshiping, and this is like kind of like an evil town. So a lot of different ways that you can just start throwing stuff down, and then you'll get inspiration later to maybe change some of this stuff up.
And maybe the jaguar folk, there's only like 10 of them, and they are the sacred species.
Ooh, nice, nice. Yeah.
And then, like, what's the next question on the list? Because
it was more economy. So I think, what is like the trader that's in the city? What do they trade? What kind of commerce happens inside of the city?
Yeah, so I mean, I think food is a big one always. But I liked the idea when we said Underdark of saying, like, okay, well, what are they getting from the drow for these potions and stuff? And it's almost like there's some sort of food from the Underdark that Furbolg just love that is like a touch of evil in it.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
It's almost like what gives them, so I don't know what Furbolg's like lifespan is, but let's say it increases it like by 100 years or something crazy.
Gotcha.
But it also, sort of bends them to evil a little bit. Yeah, I like that. So there's like some food trading, but let's see, what else is there? There's also got to be some like wares, some like clothes, some people who build these or specialize in building these tree homes. There's got to be stonework people.
And even with the stonework, we talked about how, okay, Melora maybe doesn't like the mining, but then we decided to throw a pyramid in here. So, right, okay, we're obviously going to have to change that aspect of it.
My thought was that everything that gets done against the deity, even though these people are a little bit evil to begin with, it's like everything that's against the deity, they use for art. So let's say like some people came through and did a ton of mining. And so all those people are now dead in the forest, but they've taken these rocks and they've made it into this sort of like altar in front of the tree. Was my justification for that.
Awesome. I like that.
And so like I also economy wise, there's always a commerce around religion as well. And almost like more for this, where like almost we have these not penance to Melora, or like kind of plants you can buy maybe, or like maybe a vine that sort of grows up the side of your house. It's like just shows your that you're A, keeping it alive, and B, that it's maybe like there's a vine in the forest that only grows off of blood, and so they have to like cut their hand every night to feed this plant, and it shows that they're penitent to Melora.
Solid. I think kind of one of the next bullet points here is primary trade, but I feel like we just talked about that, so we're gonna go past that. Crime rate, never would have thought to add that in there, because I guess my campaigns already have like a gang element, so I guess I did think of crime rate, but I didn't necessarily, when I'm building a city, that's not the first thing I think about. So yeah, what's the crime rate gonna look like here? I would assume low.
I would assume low as well, but that just means they have to be better at it, right?
Ooh, yeah.
So there's there has to be, because it's antithetical, right? The yin yang. There has to be somebody that, let's say it takes 50 years for one of these jaguar folk to mature. They're just very long lived, and it takes forever for them to be
like Grogu.
Like yeah, right. Like they live through childhood finally.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that there's like a trade to the Underdark. There's people that like a gang that, or a group of criminals that A, hunt them down, and B, sell them to the Underdark. So it's like all of the sacred species. There is like a dark trade or whatever, removing those from the forest, and so there's like a hidden sort of deforestation zone that they're based in. So where they live in town and they do their penance so people can see them, but they also spend most of their time in the woods.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. And I feel like in a place like this, the crime rate isn't necessarily going to be like petty theft. It's going to be more like high level, like you said on here. That's where you like political crime and taking down people or sabotaging people, blackmailing people, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of poisoning happens in this town, it feels like.
Yes. And it's just, Melora, they must have done something to offend Melora,
Yeah, like maybe there's a story where like some what's the word I'm looking for? Like old wives' tale, more or less, where like if you're eating food from the forest, if you're deemed unworthy, Melora will turn it to poison.
Oh, I like that.
So it's like a wives' tale. It obviously it totally doesn't exist because the plants are poison that are poison.
Right.
But this is the way that people. This is the way. You got me thinking about the Mandalorian. This is the way that they justify when they find people who have been poisoned for their political gains. They're like, oh, Melora took them because they were found wanting.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's a cool
that
element.
That is really dope. All right, I think we're on our last kind of two. Well, I feel like we kind of answered these already. So building style, I guess, we have like this kind of temple in the middle with this giant tree. What does the rest of Rowene look like?
Yeah, so I think like trees, not stucco, but like a lot of earthy building materials. So we've got maybe some access to concrete or clay or something like that. So there's bricks, there's trees, there's plants that have been repurposed or hollowed out a little bit so that people can live on or near them, or like since the city's been around so long that maybe they placed a rock someplace and then grew a tree or a series of trees around it and then took the rock out.
Oh, okay.
So they've got like these little cavern homes that they can dig into the dirt a little bit further if they want to add an addition to the home or things like that.
And I feel like in fantasy, like there's always this element of the time before was a lot more technologically advanced. So like, what if these bricks that they made the pyramids out, what if they weren't mined from somebody else, but that was just what was found, and then it became this holy place, and now there are these giant bricks that people are building their homes in. But it's like, kind of got that. Like this some type of like dark meaning behind it as well. What if like this was home of the giants or something like that, but the giants were extinct, but what killed the giants?
What if it's where Melora died?
Oh, that's
and, like,
dope.
The parts of her body were here, and
Yeah.
this society then sprung up there. And so she's got like maybe calcified parts so there's like caverns and stuff underneath that are like, I don't know, her heart cavern and things like that. Like maybe her parts were buried in this forest, and that's where all this grew up.
Man, I like that. That would be dope to like. I'm just imagining like an adventuring party or a story that, they come here to this part and they're trying to investigate, and then they can slowly get like a paladin comes in here and like they do their aura and like, oh, this place is like, it looks nice and homey, but like there's just this ever-present sense of like kind of evil here. And trying to do more investigation and like, there are old archives, so maybe there's a library somewhere with like scrolls that's old, or maybe somewhere the library isn't on the surface but it's underground in one of these bones.
Like it's her memories.
Oh, that
are like transcribed when she died. It was like
what if there's like this one like old crazy druid that like everyone's like, you don't mess with her but you don't really talk to her, but she's like the one. She is like the again, going back to like Viking, it's like
I love that,
the one that has like the eyes shut, like, but always is writing something, and people are like, well, we don't even know how to fucking read, so like we don't know what she's doing.
Like she's just in a cavern somewhere underground, and they just never come to find her.
They just bring food to her.
Ooh.
Like it's like, if you don't bring food to her, like we still care about the elderly, so we bring food to her. And every time we come back, the food is gone, but she's still in the same spot writing.
Yeah, and we just never talk to her.
Yeah.
And like maybe she's almost like a piece of Melora.
Yeah.
That's left.
Yeah, there's
like
some
an
type of
eternal
connection.
being almost.
Yeah.
That it's like if you're a D&D party, you immediately want to go find her, but you should not go find her.
Right. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you want to hit like the end game of this, town real quick. You go there, you offend the people, and then everyone's against you.
Yeah. No, 100%. That's dope.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, we hit all, there's political atmosphere, which we could go into, but I feel like this is a pretty good starting point for a city. I mean, I hope that created some type of inspiration. I'm excited. Like, I want to run a game in this city now.
Heck yeah.
It's going to be somewhere. Eventually, y'all are going to go to some jungle, and you're going to be like, Roween, why is this familiar?
You did that just the other day. You messed me up so bad. The last time we did exponential creativity, we created this whole, it was like, it was a sci-fi world, and it was multiple planets. We broke down to cities, we broke down to activities. It was like we got so into it.
We'll get more into it on the next podcast too.
And we then played through it as a Star Wars one-shot. Mm-hmm. And I was like, these names are familiar, the general characters are familiar. Yeah. And I was like, why do I feel like I know what's going to happen? Yeah. It messed me up so in like all the good ways, I guess. But anyway, yeah. I feel like we went through and showed a good swath of D&D world and fantasy world building. Yeah. And that was 30 minutes in the creative process with just two people to work off of. You can do the same thing by yourself. It'll be a little bit slower just because you don't have somebody to bounce back and forth with.
If you need someone to bounce ideas off, hit us up on our socials, and we would absolutely love to bounce those ideas off, because then we can come together, talk about them, and then either talk about it on the podcast or respond to you. So definitely feel free to reach out to us if you're a creative thinker who just is feeling a little bit of a writer's block or just wants to flush out a city a little bit more, because as we've talked about in a previous podcast, like creating for somebody else sometimes is a lot easier.
Yeah, we also have the infrastructure to field those already. So if you go to anchor.fm/CRTVTHNKR, there is a listener submission button, so you can actually click and just record a message for us, and we can actually play it in the next episode so everybody can hear the question you have, and we can talk about it live, which I think is interesting, and hopefully you guys do too, or you wouldn't be leaving such nice reviews on Apple Podcasts. So thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. Next week is the same general podcast, but about sci-fi ships. I think is what we're doing it on.
Yeah. So I believe we're doing a lot more sci-fi theme, and man, there is not a limit to sci-fi, and we'll probably end up relating a little bit to D&D and how you could probably use it in some type of D&D setting. But yeah, sky's the limit. Anything you want for sci-fi happens and can happen.
Technologically, it's so fun to play with sci-fi, because then it's like, well, what does that look like? Mm-hmm. There's always such a cool look to sci-fi that it's like, that's so inspirational artistically. Mm-hmm. I love that genre, and it's almost like you throw a lens flare into the idea and you're set.
Yep.
So be sure to tune in for that. That's going to be a lot of fun, and I say it's a lot like this one structurally, but it's going to be vastly different. And we're going to have a good time with it. So tune into that, and thank you for making time for us today. Creative thinkers all over the globe, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.